Here's the uncomfortable truth. The greatest damage caused by being ignored isn't the silence itself. It's the conclusion many people reach because of it, a conclusion that sounds like this. If they ignored me, I must not be important. And that's where the real suffering begins, because attention and worth are not the same thing. Yet human beings constantly confuse them. We live in a world where responses are instant. Messages arrive immediately. Notifications appear within seconds. We can see who's online, who's active, who's typing, who's viewing, who's reacting. And because we're surrounded by constant signals of attention, the absence of attention starts feeling personal. Much more personal than it actually is. 100 years ago, people could wait weeks for a letter. Today, people become anxious after 30 minutes. The technology changed. The human brain didn't. And that's created a dangerous illusion. The illusion that immediate attention equals importance. But think about the people you've accidentally ignored. Not because you disliked them. Not because they were unimportant. Simply because life got busy. You forgot. You got distracted. You were stressed. You planned to reply later. Then later became tomorrow, and tomorrow became next week. Most people have done this. Yet when it happens to us, we often assume a completely different explanation. This is called the fundamental attribution error, one of the most fascinating biases in psychology. When we make mistakes, we blame circumstances. When others make mistakes, we blame character. When we don't reply, we say, I've been busy. When someone else doesn't reply, we think, they don't care. Same behavior, different interpretation. The mind rarely notices this contradiction, but it influences how we experience being ignored. Because often, the pain isn't coming from what happened. It's coming from the meaning we've assigned to it. And meaning is powerful. A person can survive enormous challenges if they understand them. But uncertainty mixed with self-doubt creates emotional chaos. That's why some people spend months trying to understand why someone ignored them. Not because they need answers, because they need reassurance. Reassurance that they still matter. Reassurance that they're enough. Reassurance that they're worthy of connection. But here's the problem. No amount of external reassurance can permanently solve an internal question. If your sense of worth depends entirely on other people's attention, you'll always be vulnerable. Because attention is unpredictable. People change. Circumstances change. Relationships change. Life changes. And if your self-worth rises and falls with every message, every reply, every interaction, your emotional stability becomes controlled by forces outside your control. That's a difficult way to live. Imagine carrying a remote control and handing it to everyone you meet. Now they control your happiness, your confidence, your peace of mind. Whether they respond determines your mood. Whether they acknowledge you determines your value. Whether they choose you determines your self-respect. Most people would never do that intentionally, yet emotionally. Many people do exactly that, without realizing it. The healthiest people aren't the ones who never experience rejection. They aren't the ones who never get ignored. They're the ones who understand a simple truth. Someone's attention is information, not validation. Read that again. Someone's attention is information, not validation. If a person consistently ignores you, that's information. It tells you something about the relationship. Maybe they're unavailable. Maybe they're uninterested. Maybe they're distracted. Maybe they're struggling. Whatever the reason, it's information. But it doesn't automatically become evidence of your worth. Because worth and attention operate under different rules. A sunset remains beautiful whether anyone watches it. Music remains beautiful whether anyone listens. A diamond remains valuable whether anyone notices it. And human value works the same way. Your worth doesn't suddenly disappear because someone failed to recognize it. Yet this is exactly what many people forget. Particularly when emotions are involved, they begin chasing explanations. Chasing closure, chasing responses, chasing acknowledgement. believing that one final answer will finally remove the pain. Sometimes it does. Often it doesn't. Because the real issue wasn't the missing answer, it was the belief hiding underneath it. The belief that their response would determine your value. And no response can fix that belief. Only you can. Now let's look at something surprising. Many people fear rejection, but psychologically, rejection can actually be healthy. At least it's honest. At least it's clear. At least it provides direction. Imagine applying for a job. The company says no. Disappointing? Of course. But now you know. You can move forward, apply elsewhere, adjust your plans, continue your life. Now imagine never hearing back. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. You're trapped between hope and disappointment, neither accepted nor rejected, neither moving forward nor moving on. That's the hidden cruelty of silence. It keeps people emotionally suspended, and suspended emotions consume enormous mental energy. This is why one of the most powerful skills in life is learning to create your own closure. Not waiting for someone else to provide it, creating it yourself. Because the truth is, well, some people will never explain. Some people will never apologize. Some people will never give you the conversation you hoped for. Some people will leave questions unanswered forever. And if your peace depends on receiving those answers, your peace remains trapped in someone else's hands. But the moment you realize that closure is something you can create, everything changes. You stop chasing. You stop analyzing every detail. You stop searching for hidden meanings in every silence. You stop waiting for someone else's decision to determine your emotional future. And that's when freedom begins. Not because the pain disappears instantly, but because the pain no longer controls you. Think about every person you've ever admired, every confident person, every emotionally strong person, every resilient person. They've all been ignored. They've all been rejected. They've all been overlooked. The difference isn't what happened to them. The difference is what they believed afterward. They didn't interpret silence as proof of worthlessness. They interpreted it as part of life. A painful part, but still just a part. And maybe that's the lesson hidden inside every unanswered message, every awkward silence, every ignored attempt at connection. Maybe the lesson isn't about the other person at all. Maybe it's about discovering where your value truly comes from. Because if your value comes from attention, you'll spend your life chasing it. But if your value comes from within, attention becomes a bonus, not a necessity. And that's a completely different way to live. So the next time someone ignores you, remember this. Rejection says no. Silence says maybe. And the human brain hates maybe. It hates uncertainty. It hates unfinished stories. It hates unanswered questions. That's why being ignored hurts so much. Not because silence is louder than words, but because silence leaves space. And the mind rushes to fill that space. Sometimes with fear, sometimes with insecurity, sometimes with stories that were never true to begin with. The challenge isn't stopping people from ignoring you. That's impossible. The challenge is refusing to let their silence define you. Because the people who thrive emotionally aren't the people who receive attention from everyone. They're the people who remember who they are, even when attention disappears. And once you understand that, being ignored may still hurt, but it will never have the power to make you question your worth again. Because your value was never hiding inside someone else's response. It was yours all along.